Good morning, those of us in California with the burning and smoky skies. Good afternoon, good evening to those of you in Europe. I'm very happy to introduce my colleague and friend, Erkki Huhtamo. We've known each other for many years, actually decades it seems like now. And we both miss being at Ars Electronica. It became kind of an annual thing we do. What's wonderful about Erkki is that he is a historian that's like an artist, I would say. So when he first came to the broad arts and became professor at UCLA, they were going to give him an office. And he said, no, 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 I need a studio. And there was this kind of discussion in the dean's office. Why would he need a studio? And he said, well, no, I have some objects that I need to house and I need a studio. And there was a whole big discussion. And we managed, because we were in a renovation phase, it was a very lucky moment. He got a studio, as all artists did. And you will see now, the studio was empty 20 years ago when Erkki started. This is one part of his collection. I know as his friend that he's got another whole part at his home. The collection in Finland, there's, I think, a whole museum formed around it. And he was so kind to bike his way through the smog to UCLA to do this and to enter into his space. Thank you so much, Erkki. I just wanted to mention to the audience that um, during this time of quarantine, we all have a bit more time to look through our archives, to reflect back, at least those of us that are fortunate enough to have jobs in this space. And the book that you've been working on for many years now, it's been kind of on the sidelines growing and seems to be, to me, like a full circle of all your work and research: how to dismantle a fairy engine, media archaeology, which you're an expert in, as topo studies. So before you show us around, would you explain a little bit about what you're trying to do with this mega work that you're finishing now? And welcome.
All right. So, hello, everybody. We here in California, we are using these face masks wherever we go and whatever we do. But as far as I see, I'm the only person at the huge Broad Art Center building right at the moment. So it is probably safe to take it away. But it's actually my recommendation for everybody. Like in Finland, it's doesn't look like the word is going through, but I do think it makes a certain difference. So first of all, thank you for Victoria, UCLA Art and Science Center, and of course Ars Electronica Festival for being able to accommodate me in this program to share some thoughts, some ideas, and also maybe some of these media archaeologically significant objects today with you. So even before I will basically take Victoria's prompt and say a few words about this book thing, so let me begin by saying that this kind of which is actually topos, which is a certain kind of like a repeated commonplace and cliche that is picked up over and over again. So we say every cloud has a silver lining. So we, in my case at least, I would like to say that this topos sort of like kind of like has come through in a way during these past months. So for several months I was practically locked into my home, so with very few chances of getting out or doing anything else, and especially not to travel. So travel has been for many years a very significant part of my work. So sharing my ideas, giving master classes here and there around the world, and being part of doing research in physical archives, and also just meeting my friends all around the world. And this is an experience that's been completely kind of like knocked off from my normal daily life.
Mhm.
But the silver lining is the fact that it has given me a chance and also maybe a concentration to work in an quite different way with a very complex and big book project, which in a way I have to say that COVID-19 has helped me to sort of like bring this book into conclusion. So which and this is the silver lining I'm talking about. So this is a very large book which tries to sort of like summarize my long involvement with media archaeology as a certain kind of, for a long time, an emerging approach, and now something which is widely practiced around the world. So actually, some of those trips that I had to cancel had to do exactly with this broadening of the media archaeological interest. So I was supposed to be right now, of all places in the world, in Wuhan, China,
Mhm,
in a conference that is thinking about the ways of how to apply media archaeology to understanding Chinese culture better. And this was inspired by the fact that this book called Media Archaeology that I edited with Jussi Parikka in 2011 was translated to Chinese in 2019. So this book is a long story and would take more than 1 hour to go through. So I think I will leave that idea here, but probably come up with a few of those thoughts and ideas as I look at this more concrete side of things. So I am very interested in the way how different moments in time and space help us understand the present of media culture. So I think that there is a certain kind of a dialogical and dialectical relationship between those times and moments. It's more like a network of like shared ideas and interests rather than anything we could call a linear progression. So and this is a very sort of like important idea behind media archaeological approach. So I often also like, actually sometimes I think Siegfried Zielinski, another pioneer, like to think about media archaeology as time traveling in a time machine. So the time that machine doesn't stop regularly at certain places. It's kind of cruising a huge cultural space, and also we say cultural space time. And this is basically what this new book is about. So it contains a huge amount of cultural references that in a way that I guess have occupied me for about 30 years of my life.
It's so wonderful to hear that, and it makes me think about time, especially during this period where we're quarantined. I find, and a lot of people I talk to, that time goes really slow, and at the same time, it's fast. So our sense of time and space has shifted, where I can't believe it's middle of September, and at the same time, it feels kind of slow. So our sense of time has changed, our sense of linearity in history and the way we're seeing the world, and the whole idea of, when you talk, I think of quantum fields and quantum physics that we don't understand at all, but we're starting to think more in terms of this kind of dispersed way of thinking rather than this linear way of history. And I've always appreciated how you bring that in for students, where they stop thinking about new media as being something new, and really showing how there's these interrelated events that actually brought it to happen where we are, including now. I mean, I'm sure that you make some references to our situation now, to historical times, and how much actually has evolved our humanity through pandemics too, through making people stop. And
Yes, actually, so writing, working intensively in this certain kind of a almost like, for me, unprecedented isolation has certainly made me change actually quite a few things in the book in relation to what we are going through now. And I would just like to say very briefly that in a certain way, it has become clear to me that that this COVID-19 and these responses and the measures we have to take is a demonstration that we really have entered life in what we call integrated media culture or convergent media culture. So the kind of a situation where we are very deeply dependent on these devices in our daily lives and I could say in good and bad. So in good, I mean that like video visits with your doctors have become routine. So many people are using all kinds of apps to sort of like order food. Otherwise, they might go just to have a like visit the places, all kinds of things. But there's also the strange other aspect, which is that I think that it shows that the media culture is not only something external, but it's embedded in your head. And when you spend extended times with these screens and with all these devices, so it cannot avoid having an impact on your mind, how that works and how you make sense of the world and things like that. And my idea is that so this is what we understand that as media culture. So media culture exists on many levels. It's of course something very material, physical, as we will see soon, but it's also about practices, all kinds of cultural practices on all levels, and there are industrial players, but there are also us independent media users and dialogues that are created between us and other cultural agents. And then there is this aspect of discursive, which is this sort of like probably on the third layer, and the discursive is where this topos archaeology or big part of it happens. So it is this idea of like using certain ideas, giving them new meanings, applying them to various types of media contexts. So this is what the Spock is really about, and it is not looking at things from a short period of time, but actually from the period of several hundreds of years, trying to understand how this kind of condition that is now so obviously part of our everyday life, basically from even in our sleep, in our dreams, and certainly in our everyday life, how these elements have little by little been sort of like coming together. So from being separate, being only peripheral parts of our everyday life, how all of a sudden they are so central and essential. And then obviously that leads to other questions which I don't want to talk about now.
Yeah, imagine education being a big one, but let's not go there.
So with this, perhaps I would like to, in a way, smoothly switch this thing
Yes.
about the studio visit that Victoria invited me to do. So as Victoria already mentioned, so a very important part of my research is the sort of like, so we say, physical, tactile contact with these media devices, media machines. I think that this is a very foundational attitude to media archaeology, and this is something that I share certainly with pioneers like Friedrich Kittler, so late Friedrich Kittler, who was actually, I remember, like also hearing him and speaking at Ars Electronica symposia over the years. Sigrid Zielinski, of course, and Zielinski also has been contributing to Ars Electronica, and Wolfgang Ernst, who is a who's a close colleague at the Humboldt University in Berlin. And like Wolfgang and me, so we have in many ways actually very different ideas about media archaeology, which we like definitely debating and discussing over a beer whenever that is possible. And now who knows when the next time will happen. But we both think that having physical access to these devices, understanding the operating principles, is an important inspiration for understanding these bigger issues around these devices. So Wolfgang is looking at a little bit different things than I am sometimes doing. But we both think that this certain kind of materialities approach to media archaeology is essential. And I think that you can understand it pretty well if I switch to my USB, my other camera. And with this camera, I'm slowly panning around my studio space. And this studio also, this I guess explains to you what Victoria said a couple of moments ago when I made this argument that I'm not so interested in one of those little tiny cubicles that you normally get when you are sort of like doing historical and theoretical work, but that I need something else. But the problem, of course, is that, you know, when you get space, you fill up that space. And this certainly has happened to me. But I've never been hoarding things, you know, like just kind of collecting anything possible. So I have been trying to collect things that I think are important from the point of view of like inspiring not only me but the students as well, to sort of like think about media technology differently. And this is let me just emphasize that this is very closely connected with the kind of interests that Ars Electronica has been for decades in a way trying to advance and promote. So in my case, and this is probably important to just to mention even before we look at some of those objects a little bit more closely, I've just give you a couple of examples about why and how I think having access to these things makes a difference. But before I even get to that point, so let me just kind of emphasize the thing that is obvious for anybody coming to Ars Electronica, but I think it is good to sort of like have it on record, is that artists are, in most cases, kinds of media archaeologists. In the way that artists are exploring the possibilities of various types of technology, they are taking the things apart and they are combining them together and seeing and wondering what can be done with this thing and where can this thing lead. And some artists are media archaeologists in a even much more concrete sense. And I would just like to mention two famous figures who are very central to Ars Electronica. So Toshio Iwai from Japan and Paul de Marinis. And perhaps I should add the third one who is also important for Ars Electronica. This is Meiwa Denki, the Japanese device art group that also sort of like all these artists engage in dialogues with technology and technological ideas, media cultural motives and things from different times and places. And they then combine them and turn them into some kind of a performative new experiences. And I think that this is definitely a parallel track to this kind of media archaeology that is sort of like research oriented. And I would say that once again, let me mention the name of Zielinski and Wolfgang Ernst and me. So this is another thing that all of us share. So we've been working with artists with like decades, and hopefully perhaps at some points contributing a little bit to those ideas too. So with this, perhaps I will just show you a few examples why I think it is important and interesting to sort of like look at media technology in concrete ways. So what can we gain out of those, and how can we link them with bigger sort of like developments.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I can already mention that I would like to try to so towards the end to see if I can make a demonstration of a device that I have very recently got, which is kind of unique in the world, and which, if we are lucky, may function perfectly. But that is not guaranteed 100%. But we will look at that later. Okay, so let me switch again.
Here we go.
I will switch again to my my USB camera, and I'm just pointing the camera at these three little things you see here in the picture. So these things here, as you see, they are in some sense pretty kind of like, let me see if I can do better. They, and from above. So these things have certain kind of features that they are sharing with each other, but they are also different, and I think that these things can tell us very important stories. And I will switch back to my FaceTime, to my normal FaceTime camera, and I will take one of these devices. This thing here is a like a mid-Victorian British stereoscope. So, as you surely all of you, or almost all of you know, stereoscope is an important technology that did not come with virtual reality or with interest in 3D movies, but has been existing for since the, even as a acknowledged idea since the 1830s, and as a product since the 1850s. So from the Victorian era. And one of the things that makes the stereoscope, so 3D imaging in this form, interesting is of course the idea that it is an immersive experience. So when you put your eyes to these lenses, so these lenses simulate the parallax vision of our eyes. And let me just show you one of those pictures. So stereoscopic views in traditional form look like this. This must be familiar for many of you. So some people naively think that, oh, why do we put two pictures, identical pictures, side by side? But of course, the idea is that these are not identical pictures. These are pictures that are slightly different. So they correspond with the difference, parallax difference between our eyes. So this means that when you simulate the parallax difference between a device like this fantastic IP Cuts and Sutton and Son Sheffield made stereo viewer, so you enter into a kind of a simulated 3D space. It's a very special kind of space. It's not exactly identical with the the natural 3D space that within which we live, if we look at it with two eyes. But anyway, it is a strange world, and that world, of course, then also excludes another world, and that is the world in which we normally live. So when I put my eyes and so I'm faced with another reality. And obviously, this is what we share when we think about virtual reality. So when you put on a head-mounted display, one of the effects is that you gain a world and you lose another world for the time being, and so I mentioned this example. I start this tour with this example because this was actually really one of the original inspirations for my media archaeological work. So I'm old enough to have visited Ars Electronica 1989 and 1990. And that was the time of the first wave of virtual reality. So Ars Electronica gathered at that point all the great people doing work on that, and also visionaries. One of the amazing memories I treasure, and this is a true memory because we have pictures of that. So we were sitting at the Alte Welt, that I think everybody knows from in Linz, and I was sitting in the same table with Timothy Leary and William Gibson, and Jaron Lanier was there too, and others. So this was a great, inspiring, amazing moment that in a way is obviously, it is interesting to think that now we've been living with this revival of virtual reality. And but so because I was already in developing this kind of media archaeology like ideas at that time, so I started thinking that is this really so absolutely new and change and world, like world and mind changing as many of the people were saying. Like Jaron wasn't very sort of like critical at that point, so he's become more critical when he's got older. And this is one of the inspirations that actually led me to research things like stereoscopy here and the history of panoramas and that kind of issues. So and from this kind of point of view, so the early discovery for me was that this idea about immersion into an alternate world is actually a topos. Topos, which is a certain kind of repeated idea and motive that keeps on coming and going. So in a way, it's picked up in culture and then disappears again. And when this happens, it's given new meanings. So in that sense, the fact that in these past years we have witnessed this new interest in head-mounted displays and virtual reality, in a way, it is an activation of a topos. So topos that has been in culture for a long time. So Victorian culture was developed a craze for this stereoscopic kind of like, shall we say, they called armchair traveling. And in the same way, we have seen different kinds of waves happen already also on the 20th century and 21st century. And I don't think it is going to go away. The issue is that how is the kind of idea about immersion then linked and connected with the other media forms? Because this is a long story, but I have to be brief because the time goes quickly. So if, for example, we link it with the idea of people staring at the smartphone screens, which obviously is a very important thing. So in a technical sense, the smartphone is not an immersive medium. Because why? Because it leaves basically all this some kind of like first nature, the surroundings visible. So you can switch switch your gaze between these things freely. But at the same time, there seem to be quite a few people for whom this smartphone experience is very immersive, really. So this idea that even though you see the edges of the device, that if you hold it in your hand and you see the edges of the screen, now the screen is pretty much the same as the edge of the device itself, with these later models. So it raises this question that this idea about immersiveness, immersion into certain kind of a mediated reality exists on many levels. So it is not only associated with the certain kind of the logic of the gadget, so the device itself. But I will show you. How this issue has been translated in a little bit different ways into these devices. So this device here is a Victorian desktop kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope, I think, is something that all of you know. It's still made in like huge quantities, and there are very cheap ones you can buy as a souvenir, and then there are fantastic kind of artisanal kaleidoscopes and things like that. So kaleidoscope lives very much as part of our sort of like kind of everyday culture in the 21st century. Sometimes it's difficult to sort of like even kind of think that this is actually was a patented and invented device. So this was created by a Scottish scientist named David Brewster, who was also involved with the invention of the stereoscope. Now, if we look at the kaleidoscope, which was introduced in the patented 1817, and raised a huge certain kind of like kind of mania known as Kaleidoscope mania. I already wrote about this a long time ago. So at least in Europe and then in some sense somewhere else too. So it is immersive, but in a different sense, because we do not have a stereoscopy here as a principle. We just have one little peephole. So basically, when I peep into the kaleidoscope and I rotate this to sort of like look at certain kind of abstract compositions of infinite mirror space it is. So I have to close one of my eyes. But so when I'm immersed with only left or right eye, and I keep the other eye closed, a temptation may happen actually to open the eye and pretend to be looking into the world inside the kaleidoscope. And already at that time when this device was introduced and it created this crazy mania, so there were actually jokes and stories and cartoons made about the impact. So let's say a guy was on the street, so he was pretending to look into the kaleidoscope, but he was really peeking at some like ladies that that happened to be around, that kind of things. So this whole idea of immersion is always negotiated. So it exists on different layers and levels, in culture. And so this is really the sort of like a interesting part where this idea of the technological device itself becomes connected with these surrounding the things surrounding it. So it's not only the technology, the device, but the device actually can give us important hints about these things that are surrounding it. So every technological device exists on many levels. So from material devices to cultural practices, which is the way how things are used within certain kind of cultural context, with human beings around, and so on. There's a complex issue, and then to these discursive manifestations, which are these commentaries and jokes and ideas and links that we associate with technology. So media culture in that sense doesn't live on one level only. So it lives on many levels. And these levels are not always perfectly matched with each other, so to say, kind of like synchronized with each other. So this is basically one way of saying why I think the idea of media archaeology can add something not only to understanding the history, so the past, but also the present and the future of media, because this logic I don't think has ever changed. It exists on maybe in even in more complex ways with this certain kind of within this like a electronic and digital media space that has become so much part of our everyday life. I have a third device here also, which I selected, and I will show you this one now. This device here is a very rare device, I can easily say. This one is actually a kaleidoscope. This is a kaleidoscope which was made by famous Parisian scientific instrument maker Jules Dubosc. And what is interesting about this thing is that it basically has the same elements as the like almost any kaleidoscope, but it differs in very important respects. So it has, first of all, it has the lens here, and it has a kind of a cell with little pieces of glass here, and I can rotate the cell like this to modify the compositions. And there it has two mirrors. These are actually pieces of two sheets of blackened glass, which is basically what the mirrors inside Kaleidoscope normally are. And interestingly, I have a way of adjusting and changing the angles of these Kaleidoscope mirrors. This is what you cannot do with those normal Kaleidoscope, which are this kind of like a fully enclosed boxes. So why did Jules Dubosc design his Kaleidoscope in such a different way? And the explanation obviously comes from the fact that Dubosc was a scientific instrument maker. So he was not interested in creating illusions. So Kaleidoscope, originally, it was an invention by a scientist who was David Brewster. But it became very quickly a technology of immersion and illusion. So thousands of Kaleidoscope were sold for people who were not interested in understanding the technology. They were interested in this weird experience of peeking into this tube and seeing strange things happen inside it. So Jules Dubosc designed this Kaleidoscope deliberately as an open structure, and so to demonstrate the elements, the ingredients out of which this device was constructed. So we can, in a way, say that it is a skeletal instrument, skeletal device. Now, of course, the question is, why is this important and interesting? It is I think it is very important and can be linked to really huge questions. And these questions have to do, for example, with the so the logic of the software versus programming. So the idea that when we use the computer or the smartphone, we use certain, most of us use pre-made software packages or apps that we download, and we know that these software packages or software or the apps can be used for certain purposes, and that's how we use them. Then there's the other idea, which obviously has to do with creative programming or and also in other sense with like hacking of technology and this whole huge field of like do-it-yourself technology that is also very much part of the what Ars Electronica always is covering. So in those cases, the importance of actually seeing and understanding the elements of the technology bear, whether that is about hardware or whether it is about the software, the kind of whatever it is, becomes highly important. So we are not just dealing with worlds of illusion that are provided for us by somebody like an like industry or salesperson, but we are in a way negotiating those experiences differently, and sometimes creating and producing those experiences ourselves. And so that's why this difference that we can see between two different kinds of kaleidoscopes like this one, I think so from a like a media archaeological point of view, this really makes a huge difference. So that is one of the reasons why I'm very interested in these devices and looking at them and showing them to the students. So they may look like very sort of like primitive little things, but there are big and huge stories behind them that they in a way open up and can reveal for us. A lot of words. Maybe I'll show you another example, which is a kind of like a simple example with a similar kind of like big consequences. So this device here is a so-called Kinora Viewer. So this is from the early times of the moving pictures. So this is about this model was introduced 1902, and this is a device that basically shows movies not from film but from this kind of a flip reel, and it's operated by a hand crank. So when I turn the hand crank, it makes the pictures move. I wonder if I can show you. Maybe you can see something. So anyway, there is a movie. This is a magic film that I happen to have here. But I think that what is important here is that even though this is a technological piece that's related with the history of the early moving image, so there's a very important difference here as well compared with like the movies we see in the cinema or that kind of thing. And this difference is in a way manifested by the presence of this crank right here. So it is idea that we are actually manipulating in a little bit limited way, but we are manipulating it ourselves by turning the crank. And we can easily just open this thing up here, like this, and then I can change the software. So there was a large library of software for this kind of devices. And the crank here is important because it is related with the idea of the interactive technology. So it is the idea that you are actually manipulating things yourselves with your fingers. And even though this is a very, very different device from the smartphone in its functions and its technology and everything, it's very primitive in a way, you could say, compared with that. There is also an important parallel between these ideas, because these are all devices that they are media devices for our fingers. So devices that we play with, we do things with. And this is very different from the idea about like watching a movie in a movie theater where it is someone else doing it. So these days, basically, like most of those projectors are very much automated in their form. So there's not a huge difference. In that sense, so the role of the projectionist is not a very sort of like big and significant. So looking at devices like the hand crank and what it can be done, what can be done with it can be very important for thinking about the certain kind of interface logic of in the context of all these different kinds of devices that we are using it. And these are sort of like very foundational issues underlying the media culture. Now, we could look at this idea also from a very different angle. And it is, again, the question about revealing or hiding the technology. This is a display stand, as you can see. This stand is modern, but what you see in the stand is ancient. This is an early 19th century so-called phantasmagoria magic lantern slide. So from the horror shows of the time, this would be shown in a very darkened space with hidden magic lanterns from behind the screen. And the idea is that people would be screaming and shouting, "Wow, this skeleton is attacking me," or whatever. Now, what is interesting here is that, for example, this kind of a magic lantern slide also has an animation mechanism, like you see here. So what happens here when I move it? So this is, if you can see, this is Death blowing into horns, into his horn. And when he blows into the horn, all of a sudden, the graves are opening and all the dead are rising. And all of this is achieved by just moving a little brass lever right here. Again, if we think about this idea, so the difference is the fact that there's someone who is moving this lever, but it is not the user, not the audience member in this case. It is someone else, and it is used to create a show of illusion, horror effects, and that kind of things. And so here we see also the same logic as in the case of the Kinora I just showed you. So it is really important to understand where these things are being used, who is using them, and to what kind of purposes they are used. So here again we see that it is important to understand the materialities of the media devices. But the same thing that I said before, that is never enough. We always have to sort of like also take this discussion to other higher levels. So look at it in other steps, or shall we say concentric circles within culture that link things that are material and small with things that are very, very huge and large. And the negotiations that are happening on all these different levels are absolutely important. Okay, I'm looking at the time, so we do not have terribly much time left. So it's probably time to start moving towards this demonstration that I promised to you. First of all, I will very briefly show you something else which is related with this. You see, this is my desktop. And I think that part of the media archaeological interest is also to sort of like try to identify devices that are not known and feel somehow like very strange. For example, this huge device that you see on my desk is a device I found recently. This is definitely 19th century, but I still do not know what it is really used for. So as you see, this device also has a hand crank. I can turn the crank like this. And if I turn the crank, I make these mirrors inside the kind of cylinder rotate. Or actually, basically, the basic, so the basis rotates, and the image is reflected from these mirrors here. There were a couple of pieces there which I still fully don't know what they are for. So it looks like some kind of an animation device, but it's one of those interesting cases where I never seen a similar device, and I still don't fully understand myself what that device could be. But obviously, it's part of media archaeology to save what we can save. Okay. And of course, hoping that one day there's going to be an explanation. All of a sudden, I will see a picture in an old book or read a description or find another identical or similar type of thing. So I can only make some guesses. I think that it is more like an entertainment device rather than a scientific device. It could be some kind of an animation device, or it could put some little puppets or things that you would put inside in that mirror space, it's like a hall of dance, in a way, dance hall with the sort of like infinite reflection effect around it. I have to say I don't know, but if any one of you happens to know, so I would be more than happy to hear what your idea might be. So the my final example today, you see here. Sorry, a little bit difficulties. Is this device? This device here is actually it's a Japanese peep show machine that I got some months ago, and it came all the way from Japan, and it is pretty astonishing in many ways. What's also astonishing is that it has been completely preserved in its original form. And inside this device, so first of all, it's completely covered by texts, and it is a coin-operated Japanese peep show. So this device has been in some public space. The only light that comes inside is through the glass panels at the top and on the sides. As you see, this is a stereoscopic device, so it has this kind of stereoscopic viewing hood at the front. And inside the device, there is a kind of a rotating mechanism for showing a series or sequence of images. And it operates by coins, and has a clockwork motor that can be wound up from the side. So there's a original winding key on the side, and I have been trying to just clean it up, and I found out that actually it does work. And even produce music from a music box from around 1900, so late Meiji period. So I have to finish in a few moments. So let me see if I can wind it up. I put a coin in the slot, and see if I can make that at least the music box sound play. Okay, and I'm going to sort of like finish this right now, and so if anyone has a quick question, I'm happy to, of course, to take it. But anyway, so this was what I wanted to show you today. Okay, let me have a look. So there's a question from Ivana, so asking what would you say that VR is so popular in contemporary art because it is easy to consume and thus corresponds to the conditioning of the media of offline audience. I don't think that it is because it's easy to use, because I mean head-mounted displays are not yet absolutely easy to use. You know, some cases yes, some cases may, but I think it is more about the certain kind of deeper sort of like interest in this idea about immersive experience, as I explained, as a kind of a topos. So something which is not necessarily about such material things, but something maybe on a deeper level that lies on this layered nature of culture. And then there is someone who's saying it is kind of a praxinoscope. This is, of course, something that I also thought in the beginning, because it has this kind of a circle of mirrors, like Emile Reynaud used in his praxinoscope. But it doesn't. I haven't figured out how you would actually put some kind of an animation software, like a strip of animation, or even like a basic animation disk to the bottom, as you saw in this thing. So it is one line of thinking that it might be related with the praxinoscope, maybe some kind of strange model. But for the moment, those elements and their combination do not fully make sense to me. Actually, in my collection, I have the original patent model for Emile Reynaud's praxinoscope. Only one of them existing. And Christoph Killian asked also about the virtual reality, saying that could it be because there are still irritated, shocked by the immersive qualities, and adding, or just because it appears to be new. I think that this idea about novelty also has much to do with this fascination. And the novelty also has to do with the idea about forgetting, So, like the younger generation than me, who were not even born, when this first wave of VR happened, including some of my students, to have no idea what kind of many applications that were shown, including at Ars Electronica at that time. And many of these ideas that I've been trying at these conferences and places like SIGGRAPH in these past several years are a little bit like a repetition of those ideas on the level of the basic inspiration, even though they are often technically much better realized and more convincing, just like we could see from gaming technology. So I think that there is never a single explanation that can basically like give a full explanation why, for example, the VR came into being. Another important topic we don't have time to talk about would be, of course, to look at not only about VR but AR, so augmented reality, and so why, for example, the Pokemon Go mania happened 2016. So why were people so fascinated by playing that game in the sort of like physical surroundings? But that, I think, is a topic that can be looked at from a media archaeological point of view, and but we have to leave it to some other time. I think our time is up as far as I understand.